Hey guys, this is Jamie. So today I want to talk about everyone's favorite topic, which is influencers. And this was inspired by me watching Tiffany Ferg's video where she goes into more depth about influencers. And in general, I really enjoy her topic. I enjoy her internet analysis series. And there were some points I didn't necessarily agree with, but it did sort of made me think and sort of I came up with the fact that I feel like the whole idea of her video was that obviously we blamed influencers for other things than we should be blaming like the representatives in the government, stuff like from an American lens that people should be like calling their governors, their politicians they elected, and talk to them about them and complain because they put them into power, while people end up sort of fighting and complaining about influencers online instead. Now, one of the main points that kind of stood out to me was the fact that Tiffany said that obviously like people are very misogynistic when it comes to influencers because, in her opinion, she feels like most influencers are women and people tend to sort of relate that hatred onto them. And this is where, obviously, I'm not a woman, so I can't speak personally from that experience. But I don't feel like there is as much misogyny, or I didn't see misogyny, that stood out to me when it comes to influencers. But obviously, we have to keep in mind that I'm like a gay guy, so I'm into dudes and I'm a dude. So I might not see something, and something might be amiss because I never paid attention to it, and it just happens to be that way that I just didn't see it. And that's okay, but obviously, and when I think of like what I want to be influenced by, I look at more like men who talk about products, or even like when I think about like the beauty space, I still try to go like gay creators, at least gay creators, or creators which I know will be more open-minded to like men wearing makeup. So I skew from a bit of a different sphere. And I feel like I also have to say that she raised a very valid point with, for instance, that women can be judged and be like put in a position that they are the ones who shop for the household and stuff like that. And I feel like on the opposite, like I've been trying to like decorate our home, I've been trying to get more into cleaning, get more into organizing. And on the opposite, I look more for resources like good housekeeping website and different designing websites, different organization, and I enjoy those lists. I enjoy on the opposite sort of the inputs a lot of woman moms, single moms put into, and they say like this product works for me, or like this works for like my family, or like once I became a mom this, once I got married this. And on the opposite, I kind of, sure, maybe I pigeonhole, but at the same time I feel like these I trust more maybe woman in that perspective. So I don't see it from a misogynistic, from it's from the opposite. I feel like they might have more experience, or from the websites I've encountered, and they're mostly like, again, done by women. They just go towards those sources. But I don't look at them as a negative thing. That's also, but then you can maybe unpack that as well. But the point is, when it comes to influencers, even when I think like, what do I think of influencers? I don't think of a woman as an influencer. Sort of the first ones that come up in my head in a negative connotation would be, like people like Clavicular and Andrew Tate, like all the Jordan Petersons, different Russian influencers from the manosphere. And then you can argue, well, Jamie kind of work with that, and sure, but I still think of men as influencers, and that they're trying to sell me sort of like, like there's those hair gels or hair creams which make your hair curly, like phones, gadgets, clothes, music, different grind sets, grifting, I don't know, religious way of lifestyle, a bunch of stuff. But I still kind of think about men. And this also kind of made me think even more that sort of when we think about influencers, we see ourselves reflected. And unfortunately, we see that sort of like influencers became the sort of class that represents us. So when Tiffany was saying stuff like, oh, I think of women and like maybe people are being misogynistic towards them, I meant it as a mirror that it could be in a way that sort of she worry about misogyny, obviously, like any woman would. And just like I worry about like some more and like bone smashing his face because I don't want men to be seen as absolute morons, which we're coming across very often because of these sort of like leaders of us right now. And so we get worried that influencers represent us because they are the ones who represent our age, sort of our gender, our social statuses, the goals and aspirations. So sort of I do get worried like about these bone smashers and stuff, not just sort of from a pure perspective, but because like these are the dudes that people think of, you know? These are sort of the men people look up to. These are the men people think they should be like. So that's what worries me. And that's kind of, I feel like when we think about influencers, when we critique them, we also unfortunately end up subconsciously a bit critiquing ourselves because at the end of the day, if you sort of like put everything down, we all sort of tend to go back to criticize ourselves and to criticize sort of things around us and that influence us. So what I wanted to say was, even if I didn't agree with all the points, I do feel like we need to understand that our hatred of influencers because we also want to be represented in an accurate way. Like I don't want men to be represented as bone smashers or someone who listens to Andrew Tate or whatever. And that's the issue. And I feel like men are much more complex than bone smashing or fighting someone over some girlfriends. You know, it doesn't even matter about sexuality at this point. And that's what worries me. I worry that I am represented in such a way. And I understand that obviously not every man represents every man. And again, there's like sexuality issues, there's age, there's like obviously I'm in Europe, there's obviously the fact that I'm like from a Ukrainian family and stuff like that. But the point is, we need to sort of distance ourselves and understand that the real issue in the world isn't the influencers, and at the same time, we shouldn't be taking them as seriously. And at the same time, we need to understand sort of where everything comes from, where our anger comes from, how we all relate to this in the end of the day, and what does it really mean. So, what I'm trying to say is maybe the misogyny we're worried about in influencers is because we're worried about the misogyny to oneself, or like again, I'm scared of like people seeing men as bone smashers, which is the case apparently. So yeah, that's what I wanted to sort of summarize in a way. And this ended up being more of a sort of reply react discussion, which is not something that I usually do. Thank you very much for watching. I'm sorry if this ended up a bit more of a reply. I've also been quite tired, so like, yeah, just trying to gather my bearings because I've just been really exhausted, and like it was my partner's birthday, so I'm also quite tired from celebrating, and this is what I wanted to talk about. So yeah, thank you very much for watching. I hope I'll find my energy along the way because I also managed to like pull my legs, so like I've been in pain on and off. If you enjoyed this video, please feel free to give a like. Um, Feel free to follow for more, send it to someone to discuss misogyny and bone smashing. And thank you very much for watching.